Since you've clicked on this video, you've probably seen the
I'm looking for a man in finance with trust fund. 6'5", blue eyes.
It's really catchy and has taken the EDM and dubstep remix world by storm. But as I was showing this video to a friend the other day, he asked what % of people actually fulfill those requirements. And this got me thinking, how many people actually qualify to be this ideal man? What % of the population is 6'5" or taller, has blue eyes, or has a trust fund? So that's what we're gonna figure out today. Are we absolute nerds? Yes we are. So before we jump in, if you like learning about business, economics, MBA stuff, personal finance, or just how the world works, be sure to click that subscribe button and let's get into it. So first off, she's looking for a man, and my guess is that she's looking for a traditionally heterosexual man who speaks English. And for this analysis, we're going to be as generous to her extremely specific requirements as humanly possible. So we know that 18% of the world population, or about 1.4 billion people, speak English. And of those, only about 400 million speak it as their first language. And rather than keeping a tally of the percent of the world and the percent of the US, which would just be a hassle and I really don't want to do it, we're going to just stick with this 400 million number as our total. Because there are about 330 million people in the United States, plus about 66 million in the UK, and a couple other millions elsewhere for good measure. So of our 400 million, 50% are male, and depending on what source you look at, about 10-ish% of the US population is LGBT. So we'll times the 50% by 90%, which puts us roughly at 180 million. But I don't think she'd want to marry an 80-year-old, so let's talk about age. For this, we're going to assume that she would be happy with anyone who fits all the other requirements, as long as he'd be between the ages of 18 and 45, which we know is about 35% of the population. So now, before we've even gotten to the finance or trust fund stuff, we have whittled it down to 32% of men in the United States who are straight and between the ages of 18 and 45, which is about 63 million people. So now let's look at finance. Getting exact data for finance is hard because every school has slightly different names for their majors. For example, at Brigham Young University, there's a finance major, strategy major, accounting major, and marketing major. While just down the street at Utah Valley University, it's all business majors with different emphases in finance, marketing, accounting, and the like. But we do know that about 20% of college graduates earned a business degree in some way. So in our attempt to be as kind to her as possible, we're going to say that 60% of those graduates end up working in finance, not marketing or accounting or some other entirely different field. So now about 2% of the natively English-speaking population, or 7.5 million people, fulfill the requirements. But that number is about to drop a lot more, with her next ask, which is having a trust fund. According to Investopedia, a trust fund is an estate planning tool that establishes a legal entity to hold property or assets for a person or organization. Trust funds can hold a wide variety of assets like cash, real estate, stocks, bonds, or business equity. Now, the reason why I mentioned the definition of what a trust fund is that there's actually no requirement for the size of a trust fund. You could have a trust fund worth $50,000, $500,000, $5 million, or $50 million, and they are all called trust funds. Now, I don't think she really cares about the legal structure behind the wealth. What she's actually asking for is a guy who is wealthy and or comes from a wealthy background, because even if you're in finance working at Goldman Sachs in your first year, assuming you're not doing investment banking, you're gonna be making about $65,000 a year, which is a good salary, but it's not like crazy rich, buy anything you want kind of money. So having a family with extra financial backing would be a nice perk. Anyway, for this, it's impossible to figure out what % of 18 to 45-year-old men have the legal trust fund structure for themselves. So our proxy to cut that down is to figure out what % of households are making over $1 million a year. This should give us a general idea as to how many people would have family financial help. And despite Americans thinking that 10% of the population makes over $1 million a year, the reality is that only 0.5% do. And of those 0.5% who make over $1 million a year, I think it's safe to assume that not all of them are trust funding their kids and or helping their kids out a lot. So we're gonna say that only half are trust funding their kids. But hey, we're still looking at 18,900 potential suitors for this gal, which is 0.018% of men. But if she wants blue eyes, we have to cut that number down even farther. In the United States, about 27% of people have blue eyes, which is a lot higher than internationally. It's only about 10% internationally. Now, this is because the majority of the United States is white at 60.1%, and people of European ancestry are way more likely to have blue eyes. So now we have to cut the datable population to be down to 5,103, or 0.0025% of natively English-speaking men. Now, when you hear that she wants a guy with a trust fund, you instinctively know that it's an extremely rare attribute. But when I surveyed a bunch of my girlfriends asking what percent of the US population was 6'5" or taller, they were all guessing around the 10% range. But that's not the case. In fact, the amount of men who are even 6 feet tall or taller is way smaller than you'd think. According to the CDC, being 6'2" or taller puts you in the 95th percentile. So that means that you're taller than 95% of people. And just being above 6 feet tall puts you in the 75th percentile, which means that when you hear a girl saying that she wants a guy who's at least 6 feet tall, she's cutting out 75% of the population. Anyway, from what I can find, only about 0.5% of men are 6'5" or taller. So when we multiply out 90% that are straight, 35% that are in the right age range, 12% that are in finance, 0.25% that have a trust fund, 27% that have blue eyes, and 0.5% that are 6'5" or taller, we get that out of the natively English-speaking world population, 0.00001276% of men fit all of these idealized requirements. What is that as far as actual people? Well, it's 25.52 people, which will round up to 26 because you can't have a percentage of a person unless you're a politician in the late 1700s. So 26 men hypothetically fit all these requirements in the song. Now, I know that it's just a catchy song, but I think it's worthwhile to recognize how unrealistic some of the standards that we set for ourselves or others are. It makes sense to want a tall guy as a girl or as a guy for a girl to have big boobs or something like that. But the reality is that none of us have any control over those aspects of who we are, and it only hurts ourselves if we write off someone for not having X, Y, or Z characteristic. Your happiness in a relationship with someone will not be based on their height, eye color, cup size, or wealth. Sure, these are all nice perks, but your happiness will be based on how well you get along, the values you share, the hobbies you enjoy, and the things you accomplish. So rather than getting down that you aren't a 6 foot tall something guy with blue eyes making tons of money every year, what you can do is improve your station on things that you can control. Work hard at school or work, hit the gym, improve at the piano or woodworking or whatever hobby that you're really passionate about, and practice being kind, caring, and compassionate to others, and you'll end up being way better off. Ultimately, it's the things that we do with our lives and the way that we treat others that matter most, not how much money you make, the abs you have, or your height that matters. So hopefully this leaves it on a good note. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to click that subscribe button and I'll see you guys all next time.